Hey everybody, welcome to the Crit House. We are continuing our MyFIVE series where we talk to photographers and artists and other photographic people about images that have influenced their creative development. And we are so honored today to be joined by somebody I've been a fan of for a very long time, Sig Harvey. It is great to have you on the program.
It's a real true honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I am going to desperately work hard to not seem like too much of a fanboy through this conversation, but I am admittedly a Sig Harvey fanboy. We are looking. We have work today that we're going to talk about from Chris Killip, Sally Mann, Yamamoto, Sophie Calle, and Béatrice De La Porte. And I think I might have mispronounced some of those, so I apologize to whoever the artist. But Sig, again, thank you for joining us. It is just a pleasure to be here. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about like who you are as how do you think of yourself as a photographer or as an artist, in whatever way you talk to you about yourself.
Well, I'm a photographer who I first identify as a photographer, but I also write, and that's a part of my work, a very important part of my work. So I work, typically I work in large format color, and I guess the writing would be creative nonfiction. And I sort of think of my pictures as that way too. We define photographs less in the way that genres of writing is defined, but it is definitely linked. It's nonfiction, but it's also some creativity, licensed to tell some stories. My intention with my work, both with the writing and with my photographs, is to sort of really to elevate the everyday, but to find something that feels rare or special or a little bit unusual about the everyday. And so I think that's where the magical realism comes in, because it sort of seems real, but how could it possibly be? But that's sort of my thesis of trying to get to what feels rare in an ordinary world.
Yeah, I love how you talk about that.
Oh,
such a fan. So you were given the assignment, which I am told by some people is a challenging and difficult task, to pick 5 images out of the entire canon of artwork throughout history, and you've chosen 5. What did you think about in making that choice?
Initially, when you asked me, I was just thrilled. Of course, can't wait to do that. I'm a complete book nerd, photo book nerd. I've collected for 30 years. And so I thought, no problem, I know exactly which 5. And then you get into the weeds of it, and it got harder and harder and harder. And then this week I just went crazy. Almost at one point I was like, I almost need another week to decide. And then I thought, it's never going to get easier. There's 2 things that sort of came up for me, and I wondered if you've experienced this. Well, you must have, I'm sure. There's the work itself, and then there's the photographer.
Yes.
And how that varies.
Yes.
But also, work, the images, or the images that I have selected look most of them nothing like mine. I've been influenced by these photographers or these works in some cases deeply, but it doesn't necessarily play out visually in my own work. I think that was the biggest learning curve. I could have done a different set of 5. I think if you had asked me a different question, if you'd asked me, who do you see visually referenced in your work, which is perhaps a less interesting question. I think it's more this idea of what has moved you.
Or perhaps a more interesting question. It's sort of, they're both really interesting things to think about.
Yeah, I really grappled and loved that grappling. And I was having text exchanges with fellow photographers, and like, which would be your 5? And then it turned into sort of this back and forth. Oh, no, no, no. And one of my friends who I was texting with, his 5, really, there's and he is completely a unique photographer, but you could see the references in his work to those of his 5, which I don't know if you would see that in mine. So anyway, it opened up this beautiful door. Anytime I get to nerd out on photography is a good time for me.
Well, so 2 things. I want to know who that person is and invite him on the program. Okay. And then the second thing, let's take a look at your 5 images and see what you're talking about. we're starting with your first image from Chris Killip, and I'm
Yes.
going to admit I was not familiar with this. And when you first sent it, I spent a minute sort of glancing at it, and I was like, well, it's kind of interesting. And then I saw the little kid in the window,
Yeah.
and it just gave me joy. But you tell me why this image is here.
Okay.
Harvey.
Okay. So Chris Killip was without a doubt going to be on my list. Because my first love was documentary. When I was 13, I worked in a darkroom in Exeter, the Gandy Street Arts Hall. So I think more in books than single images. So many of my
Yes.
references will come from books. And this, for me, Chris Killip changed my life. I have it here. I keep it now in a plastic bag, even though most of my books have got tea stains and I live with them, I sleep on them and lend them. But this book is now sort of, it's a special place in my heart. It came out in 1988, and I was 14, 15 at the time, and it blew me away. And this is the original copy I got then, and
Very nice.
it's actually since been re-released, second edition, but this is a first edition. And really, I could have taken any of the images from here. And what it taught me, and why it was so profound for me, and his work is, I think, is so extraordinary, was that, and there's a brilliant essay by John Berger in the book too, was that it was the camera, it showed me that the camera gave you access into other people's lives, more so than anything else that I had experienced. It gave license to go and stare. It gave license to meet people. It legitimized like banging on someone's door and asking questions. And I, as a 13, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, I decided then, this is how I'm going to spend my life. So while my pictures don't look like Chris Killip's, although there's something I'll talk about at the end, this decision to sort of live with a camera and how it can make your life, no matter what genre you live in, or you work in, cameras, photography, only bring joy to your life. And sort of this road that we walk with them, this life, I just think it's the most extraordinary way to live a life. You know, I selected this out of the book, but as I said, it could have been any of them. But I loved this idea of what we were looking at. I like the atmosphere that's happening with the weather behind. And then that moment, that sort of decisive moment where the child is looking through the window. And so many of his works, particularly from this book, have that element.
Sally Mann is your second image.
Yeah, and again, so this is from Immediate Family, very famous image. I'm sure lots of people put Sally on their list of you know, work that have influenced. I mean, seminal work. She, I think, is an extraordinary person, which is that's really important to me too. And just the idea that the camera can be turned. When I fell in love with her work, it was this idea that the camera doesn't have to always be outward, that it can be turned on the interior lives, on the domestic. Her use of light, I think, is sort of extraordinary. Just the beauty, the deep beauty in all of her work, in her entire collection of books and photographs that span her life as a working artist. They all are so deep seated in sort of memory and light and intimacy, what we think we might know through looking at a photograph. So, and also this idea of an extended project. I think before I fully understood Sally's work, or known about her work, when I was more sort of on the streets, I was very much sort of going out and just roaming around, trying to find something, kind of like target practice in many ways. And then when I sort of studied Sally Mann's work, I really thought about what it is to have a project that lasts a lifetime. And that has been a huge influence of her on me.
Yamamoto is number 3 for you. Tell me about this. This is so lovely.
Oh my God, I'm just thrilled to even look at it on the screen.
Me
Okay,
too.
so I have a really fun, well, it's not necessarily fun, but it's a good photo nerd story about this picture. Okay, so I was probably, I don't know, it was probably 20 years ago, something like that. And I went to AIPAD in New York. I think it was AIPAD. And maybe it was my first time showing there. or something around that time. I'm probably getting my dates not exactly right, but anyway, a gallery booth had this this piece on the wall, and I could not stay away from it.
Oh, I
It
can
was
see
like,
why.
and it's tiny, right? It's tiny. It's a 4x6.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Okay.
I couldn't take my eyes off it. It was like it was a fireplace in winter. I kept coming back to this booth. It was a Yancey Richardson booth. She must have been like, get out of here. I had no money. I had no money. And it was maybe $800, but I couldn't afford it. I had no money. That was like, a month's rent or 2 months rent at the time. And so I thought, I will I'll find a goalpost. I'm a photographer. I'll find a goalpost, and
I could do
when that
that.
breaks, there's a cloud on top of it. Well, for 20 years, or maybe it's even 25 years, I have been searching for a goalpost in a cloud, and it's never there. And it's so many things I love about that idea is that, we often say when we're driving, oh, I'll photograph. You see something, you're like, oh, I'll come back to that.
Yeah,
I'll later, or on the way back, or the next time.
you
And
missed it.
you don't. It's never the same. It's always different because the light's different, you're different, the house got pulled down, I don't know, whatever it is. And so it's a real reminder that sometimes things only happen once for a photograph, and that there's no time to waste. Also, so then, 10 years later, I actually bought this piece and I took it down off the wall. Forgive my frame, there's a little something in there, but so it's a tiny little photograph.
Oh, it's
And
lovely.
I absolutely, I love it. It takes my breath away. I think because it was the time when I was really starting to think about metaphor and symbol, and how our pictures are this silent language. The language of art is metaphor and symbol. And so I really moved into that realm with this photograph, and it sort of lit and blazed a trail for me for the past 25 years.
Your fourth image from Sophie Calle. I think, yeah.
That's right. Okay, so I've always loved her. She's a French national treasure, which I also love. The French, so smart. And we are drawn to work for one reason or another that's sort of that's early, that precedes the work that comes out of us. I think that's true for many of us. And her use of text and image together, unbeknownst to me at the time, really influenced me. And so this is a piece, again, I could have picked a number of them. This is a piece where she this was based on a character from a Paul Auster novel, where this one woman was, I've forgotten her name, but she was eating a very sort of restricted diet. So on certain days, Wednesday being the white day, she would only eat white food. On Tuesdays, it was pink food. On Thursdays, it was green food. And it was just this idea of living life through art and vice versa. So on Sophie Calle's birthday for 15 years, any presents that she got, she would photograph and document them, which doesn't sound that interesting the first year, but like a lot of work that grows and evolves over time. 15 years, it starts making a comment on popular culture, what's in at the time, how, what is current at the time. And so she has so many different projects that span her lifetime as an artist, and they're all wonderful. I can't speak highly enough about her. Do you know her work?
I don't. In fact, I was just going to say thank you for the introduction, because I was not familiar with it. But again, I mean, this is my education. So you have educated me on something that I had not been aware of before, and I'm looking forward to diving in more deeply as well. Your fifth and final artist or piece of work is from Béatrice De La Porte.
I know, it's flown by. Okay, so I did something different. I think the first four people I selected, this is work I've known for 20, 30 years, right? Longer in the case of Chris Killip. How old am I? Yeah. So this is a newer, a couple of years ago. It won the Paris Prize, the Aperture Prize, I believe. And so this is a newer book, but it's really influencing me now. So I thought that would be
perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I love this picture for many reasons. I love this book for many reasons. It's got a heft to it. I love her use of color. It's the pages, and I just want to show this. the pages are actually uncut. They're perforated, and some people choose to rip them open.
Oh, wow.
And some people, and inside you've got contact sheets. There's more content inside, so you
Wow.
have to like tear the pages to see that content. So it really says a lot about you if you're ready. I can't tear mine yet, but
I'm not ready for it yet. Yeah.
what I love about this book, this image, it is about Beek's relationship to Agata, who is a friend of hers, and it is about their relationship between photographer and subject, and that is something that really interests me. Who has the power? And I am now, in the last year, have started a documentary project, which, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, was my first love. And I've sort of going back to my roots. And so this book has been really inspiring for that reason. And the way she uses light and color, I think that Beek has done an extraordinary job of blending fine art and documentary, where the genres don't matter anymore. It's like, is it a good picture? You know, and the answer is, in this book, is yes. And so there's a lot of text in this book, or in some texts, both Agata and Beek de Porter are writing. And that is really fascinating to me, because I've had a problem with, not a problem, but I've found documentary complicated, you know, because who has power, whose voice is it? You know, we know that the camera is power. We know certain images skew a certain way. And for me, that's really important, the agency that happens with sitter and photographer. So these are all things that I'm thinking about right now, and how to do it, and how to do it right, and how to give that agency to the person I'm taking the photograph of, and yet it still be the picture that I want. So these are all questions that I'm really interested in. I think, you know, how do you give your subjects the authentic voice, you know, not the one necessarily you would pick? Or so it's just bringing up all these great questions. But again, you know, like all the people I've picked, I mean, look at this book. It's gorgeous. The color, the light. I mean, let's not forget, I'm also obsessed with color. And you know, and I mean, and her work is, it has all of those things. I mean, and the book design is extraordinary. Some images wrap around the page. I think this is an extraordinary book. It's the best book I've bought in a few years.
Let me just say before we wrap up, you have the best color scheme of any interviewee here we've had on the Crit House, with the whole attire and the lovely.
Thanks.
Sig Harvey, it's just been a pleasure talking to you. As I have said a couple of times here, I'm quite the fanboy, love your work, and it is just an honor to have you on the program.
Well, I'm deeply grateful. I mean, it's I can't think of a nicer way to spend an hour. So thank you so much for inviting me. It's been great to get to know you, and what a great show.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching the Crit House.